I want to go across to Nalin Kohli first, because the BJP has come out today and said that Access Now, which is one of the two NGOs that Apple says you can go to if you want to find out how your phone's been hacked and whom, is funded in part by George Soros. So you're using the fact that George Soros' Open Society Foundations has funded Access Now to suggest that somehow George Soros, and by that you mean anti-Indian government elements, are behind the Apple Snoopgate scandal. So we'll get into that, but why don't you explain to our viewers first and foremost, Mr. Kohli, why do you think that there could be a George Soros angle to this Apple Snoopgate case?
It's in public domain. It's not about the BJP setting up an investigation. This has come in the public domain. For example, let me take funding is an important factor. If somebody is funded through the ISI, say example, in India, they may do anything they want, but that funding would become a relevant factor that they are related to the ISI. So George Soros as a person, and to put it as bluntly, is a man who has a very high opinion about himself and he wants to destabilize governments. He seems to benefit by destabilizing governments and benefiting economically. He keeps company of very interesting people, if I may use the word interesting in that sense. And this is not a Snoopgate. This is a false alarm that one has to look back in context. What happens? Suddenly a set of opposition leaders say, we've received this email. Apple then goes out and puts out in the public domain, as the media reports, that this was in 150 countries, not India. Then they say, no, this may not be the correct position. This may be an alarm only, a false alarm. Government of India immediately says, please join the investigation. We want to know what is happening. What is the state-sponsored thing? Government of India has no time for all these things. There are enough important things to be done. And what does the opposition do? Immediately jump up and start blaming the BJP? I mean, is this what the BJP's job is supposed to be, or the Government of India's job? On what basis? What evidence? What credible thing? Just an email comes, and what that email does is link up to an organization that has suspect funding. So this has come in the public domain. All of it has to be considered.
Okay.
And let's not forget, Rahul Gandhi ji a few years ago went ahead, 1 minute, just one thing. Mr. Rahul Gandhi was even willing to meet Cambridge Analytica, and it was reported by the media, an organization that made it an agenda to make sure that elections don't happen freely. So then, therefore, the question that has to be asked is the opposition parties would be willing to link up with any allegation, even if it's funded by people who may not be so sacrosanct, and that too may not be in India's national interests? This is what they will have to answer.
Okay. So I have over here, Supreshne, the list of some of the key funders of Access Now, which is one of the two NGOs, digital rights NGOs that Apple says you can go to. And what Nalin Kohli says is factually correct to the extent that open program support Asia Pacific comes from Open Society Foundations, who have donated at least $700,000 to this NGO in 2023 itself, just in this year, 700,000. And if I look at some of the other organizations that are supporting this NGO, whether it is Wellspring, whether it is the Ford Foundation, whether it is Meta, Discord, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the funding is much lesser. So from the list of funders that we have, which is from the accessnow.org financials website, George Soros seems to be the biggest backer of Access Now, and we know what George Soros' views on the state of the Indian government and in democracy are, leading the BJP to wonder whether dal mein kuch kala hai. How is George Soros involved in this? How do you, as the Congress spokesperson, respond to what's come out now in the public eye? Supreshne.
So first and foremost, thank you very much for having me on the show, and it's a good evening to both my fellow panelists and you. I hope because you listened to him in rapt attention, you are not going to interrupt and wait for me to finish. The reality is that I do not hold a brief for anybody. I hold a brief for the Congress party, and as someone who also got this threat notification, I have every business to talk about it. But it seems from what you are saying, and it seems from what the BJP is saying, this has not been unearthed through some investigative journalism that who's funding Access Now. And I will come to Access Now in just a bit. But it does seem increasingly for the last 3-4 months, in fact 6 odd months, that George Soros, some gentleman sitting in the United States, is responsible for 90% of what is happening in this country. then why do we have an elected government? Why do we have agencies which have become frontals of the BJP, quite literally? Why do we have law enforcement? Why do we have investigative agencies? Why do we have ministries of information and technology, or for that matter, CERT-in? So that's point number one. Point number two, and I want to make 3 points here. So my point number two is Access Now and Citizen Lab just last month, for your very information, just last month, they actually assessed certain threat notifications that were sent to 3 people in Russia. It was found to be true. 2 of them were journalists. Their phones were hacked, and indeed they were being snooped upon. So that was not a false negative as they would want to claim it to be. And the third and the last point that I want to make, and very briefly in the next 30 seconds, I want to rewind to what has happened in the last 24 hours. Some of us in the opposition, including myself, we got a threat notification from Apple on our phones and as an email, and which said that your phone can possibly be subject to a state-sponsored attack, which essentially means your phone could be hacked and there could be snooping happening on your phone. The reality is that large sections of the media, which is laughable, and of course India's IT minister went to town with an Apple statement. But that Apple statement was on its website and in their reference notes from August 23, which means 4-month-old statement was used by India's IT minister and the media's breaking news to defend. The reality also is that Apple in its pre-drafted statement also says there could be some false negatives, which in simple English means there could also be some positives. As responsible citizens of this country who get a threat notification like that, what do you expect us to do? Keep quiet, hide under some rock and pretend it never happened? I think as responsible citizens, we brought it before the government. But the minister who sat there, and I have him on record, the minister who sat there did not know anything. The minister who sat there said, we will involve CERT-in, which is a technical division of the Government of India, reports to MEITY, and that is going to do the fact-finding. The reality is that CERT-in on the 27th of October this year had issued an advisory, had issued an alarm, and said that these phones, without upgrading to iOS 17.1, are susceptible, are vulnerable. On the very same day, on October 27th, Mr. Ashwani Vaishnav was tweeting phones made in India by Tata.
Okay.
That's the reality. He did not even know
so
that
now,
CERT-in had already issued an advisory. So this is the left arm not knowing the right and blaming India's opposition. I mean, get your marbles, guys, and get over the George Soros mania.
India's #1 political reporter.
Defines what seems to be happening, vendetta politics. कोई दूध के से धुला हुआ नहीं है.
Unmatched eye, unmatched experience.
The world has changed. My black hair has become grey as well.
And with unmatched passion for the story.
Do not monopolize the conversation.
When it's 100% news that matters. It's News Today with Rajdeep Sardesai. Monday to Friday, 9 p.m. Only on India Today TV.